Brothers and sisters, welcome. Now, okay, some of you are probably thinking, did you just shave? Okay, so I didn't just shave. What happened was this. I filmed a lot of these videos for this particular discipleship course of image, identity, freedom when I had a beard, but things were crazy and I totally forgot to film this video. So I'm filming it now when I don't have a beard. Okay, awesome. Now that, we got that out of the way, we can just go for it. So listen, we spoke last time about God's plan. We spoke as well about the devil's plan. And within God's plan, it's always about relationship, right? God's always trying to save us. He wants to share his divine life with us. But what's interesting is, since we're made in the image of God, if we have an image of who God is that's false or incorrect, the way that we're going to see ourselves is going to also be false and incorrect, right? This is, again, one of the reasons why the devil wants to begin to make us question who God is, right? Because it's actually questioning, right, his image, how we see him. And again, if we begin to question and agree with a false image of who God the Father is, it's going to distort our own image of ourselves. And it's going to distort, well, then how does this relationship work? So in this session, we're going to be speaking about what Jesus did, right? Because Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil. He actually came to destroy the false image that the evil one has tried to implant within our world, within our hearts, within our minds of who God the Father is, so that we will walk away, that we won't trust him. And yet Christ, as it says, he who sees me sees the Father. He's the perfect image of the Father. And we're going to speak and to see what Christ does, what he did, how he's able to reveal the God the Father. And since Christ is the perfect image of the Father, he perfectly reveals to us who he is. And by being able to know who God the Father is, who our Papa is, knowing his image, understanding his heart, we get to know who we are. We get to be able to experience the relationship and the freedom that comes with that relationship, because it was always and forever will be about freedom. And God desires us to have freedom to flourish in this life. And a part and the beginning of actually having freedom and flourishing is starting with the proper image of who God the Father is. We've spoken about the devil's plan. We've spoken about God's actual plan. But now we got to get into the reality of, how do we see God? Do we see him properly? And if our image is incorrect, well, then you know what? It's going to totally distort how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves and him in this relationship. And so to do this, we're going to be taking everything from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15, speaking of the parable of the prodigal son. Man, I love the parable of the prodigal son, probably my favorite. And to be honest with you, it is one of the parables that reveals who God the Father is the most, right? So if you're not familiar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just speak about the situation in the actual parable itself, and then I'm going to begin to kind of dissect and speak so much of how the Father reveals who he is through this beautiful story of the prodigal son. Okay, Luke chapter 15, you got a dad who's got two sons, right? You got an older son, you got a younger son, okay? And the younger son approaches his dad and he's like, "Hey dad, listen, I want my inheritance right now. Give me what is due to me. I'm leaving. Peace out." Now, okay, when do we ever get an inheritance from our parents? Think about it. When they die, right? So the younger son is literally going to his dad and being like, "Hey dad, I wish you were dead. You are dead to me. Give me then my money. Give me the inheritance that is mine, because to me, you are dead." This is literally what the younger son is saying to the father in this moment, right? I mean, my goodness, how painful that must have been for his dad to hear that, to you, I'm dead. And yet the father gives, "Okay, here you go." He gives his younger son his inheritance. And his younger son, right, he goes off and he just squanders it, right? I mean, spends it on a life of dissipation, right, on everything that kind of brings him pleasure. And what happens is the land begins to have a famine. and he recognizes he has nothing left. Like, he's lost everything, right? He literally has spent all his inheritance. He has nothing left, and he finds himself on, well, a pig farm. Literally, a pig farm. And he looks and he begins to see, right, all these pigs getting fed, and he literally is desiring to eat the pigs' food. He's so hungry. He has nothing, right? He's lost everything. He's so hungry, and he's watching these pigs eat, and he's like honestly just desiring, like, man, if I could just, I would love to eat this right now. I would love to eat just some pigs' food because I am so hungry. And during this moment, he begins to actually realize, man, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough to eat? And here I am right now desiring to eat the food of pigs. He says to himself, you know what? I'm going to get up. I'm going to go back to my dad. And I'm going to tell him, Dad, I have sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. I do not deserve to be called your son. But please treat me like one of your hired workers. All right, this was his plan. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to my dad. I'm going to humble myself, and I'm just going to ask him just to treat me like a hired worker. Because you know what? The hired workers of my dad get treated way better than I'm getting treated right now, have way more than I have right now. They actually have real human food to eat and a place over their head and clothes on their back, and they're taken care of by my dad. Well, here I am. I've lost everything, and I'm desiring to eat the food of pigs. And so the son gets up and he goes back home. And it says that while he was still a long way off, right, his father caught sight of him, right? So his dad sees him coming from a long way, and he's filled with compassion, and he begins to run towards his son. It says that when he gets to him, he embraces him, he kisses him, right? And what's interesting is immediately the son like goes into what he's going to say. He's like, Dad, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired workers. And his dad like immediately responds like, get the robe, get the sandals, put the ring back on his finger. Let's get a feast right now. Let's go kill that fattened calf because my son is back. He was lost and now has been found. Let us rejoice. And so they have a party, like this crazy party for his younger son, who literally was like, you're dead to me, squandered all his inheritance, and now he's back. And what happens next is the older son is kind of coming in from the field, doing his work, and he recognizes like this kind of party and commotion, and he's like, what's going on? And one of the hired workers is like, oh, well, your brother's back. Like, your brother's back. Your dad's so crazy excited, and he's throwing him a party. And the older son gets super mad. He's not having any of it, right? He's like, I am not going to that party. I am not going to that party. And so he actually stays outside. And when his dad finds out that he's like not going to come in and enjoy the party, he goes out to him. And he's like, son, please come in, like enjoy the party. Like, what's going on? And his son just like, his older son just lets him have it. He's like, you know what, right? I have served you my entire life. I've done everything you've asked of me, right? And you have never given me a young little goat to feast on, like with my friends. Like, I am not going back, right? Like, and then all of a sudden, your son, right? This son that just takes your inheritance, says that he's dead to you, runs off and spoils it all. The moment he comes back, you're going to throw this crazy party for him, you know? I'm staying out here. And the father's response, he says, my son, everything I have is yours. You have been with me always. But now your brother's back. He was lost and now has been found. He was dead and he's been brought back to life. Let us rejoice. Let us rejoice that your brother my son is back with us. Okay, so that's the story of the prodigal son. And right now I'm actually gonna go back through a lot of it, and I'm gonna kind of open up these beautiful truths that the parable offers us that reveal to us who God the Father is and who we are in his eyes. Now, one of the first things we have to recognize and even actually ask ourselves is when it says that the Father sees his son coming from a long way off, right? He runs to him. He's filled with compassion. So, question, how can his dad actually see him coming from a long way off? Like, he's not like he's right in front of him. He's like super far away. How is it possible that his dad was able to see him? Think about it. Well, you gotta be looking for him, right? Which means his dad never turned his back on his son. Like, he was literally like on the patio, like on the porch, just being like constantly looking, right, for his son, right? Even though his son was like, you're dead to me, to the father, the son was never dead to him. He always was towards his son, right? He was constantly looking. The only way the father can actually see his son coming from a long way off is if he's looking for him, right? So the Father, right, is always looking. He's always towards us, right? You would think that, your son tells you that, oh, you are dead to me, give me my inheritance. You would think the immediate response after you give would be to turn your back. But if you turn your back on the son, he never would have been able to see him coming from a long way off. And so it beautifully reveals first and foremost that Papa's for us. Even if we're not for him, even if we choose to walk and reject away, he's still for us. He's still there waiting, watching, looking. And this is what's so beautiful. The moment he saw him, right? His eye caught him, he was filled with compassion, right? And what's really beautiful is filled with compassion. In the Greek, really what he's speaking about is like from the very depths of who Papa is. He felt the compassion and even empathized, right, with his son. And what this really means is his dad felt how horrible, how alone, how sad, how scary, how anxious, how broken his son was. Right? He felt what that must have been like for his own son to be apart from him and to have nothing and to lose everything and to see him like this. The father was filled with compassion and empathized immediately, and he experienced like, I don't want you to experience that anymore, and so he runs to him. Right? The father runs to him. And what's actually really beautiful about the fact that the father runs to his son is that within Jewish culture in that time, men don't run. Like, they're not running, right? Like, that just don't happen. So even when Jesus would speak of this parable to those that were listening, that would be like, whoa, like no way the dad ran towards his son, right? Like unthinkable. Right, that there's no way he'd run towards him, right? And even Jesus being like, oh no, your papa will definitely run after you. He will totally run towards you, right? There's no these limitations of, you must come to me. Papa's like, I will go to you. If I just see this movement in your heart that you want me back in your life, I will run as fast as I can to you. And this is what's crazy too. The dad never knew what his son was gonna say. I mean, think about it. Like, the last time he had a conversation with the son was, well, when his son said, you're dead to me. I want nothing to do with you, right? Give me my inheritance. And he's running to his son and yet has no idea if his son's going to apologize. If his son's going to persecute and rebuke him and yell at him again. He has no idea. Remember, he just sees him from far away off. He experiences compassion, empathy, and love for his son, and he just runs for him, right? Like, so it's crazy. The father runs because he sees his son, not because he knows what his son's about to do. Like, man, like that's crazy. This crazy, beautiful reality of like, whoa, like you have no idea. He could totally get hurt again. The father doesn't care. He sees his son. He's like, boom, I'm running towards my son. That's my son. And I always think too, the reality of what it must have been like for the son. I mean, think about it. The last conversation you had with your dad was, you're dead to me. And you're seeing your dad run at you. I'd be like, oh no. oh no, I'd be like, okay, take cover. I might like want to run away. Might want to run away. Like, who knows, right? But the son like lets him come. It's really interesting. I'd probably be scared. I wonder what the son went through, and yet he lets his dad come. And like now they're face to face, the father like kisses him, and it's as literally as like he like jumps and like crazy embraces his son and like falls on him. That's kind of in the Greek what it is. Like his dad, like it's like, think about it. If you're running super fast, it's gonna be hard to like slow down. And he just kind of lets his love just totally overflow on his son, right? And this moment, the son, like he says his spiel, like, you know, I don't deserve to be called your son anymore, right? And the immediate response of the father, right, is no, get the ring, get the robe, get the sandals, right, put it back on him, right? Let's kill the fattened calf. Like, this son of mine was dead and is now back to life. He was lost and now found, right? It's crazy because all those actual, like the sandals and the robe and the ring are actually external signs that he's the son of this father, right? The son left his dad, and he's actually going back to his dad and trying to demote himself because of his actions, right? That I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Treat me like a hired worker. And the father's like, whoa, I am sorry. There is nothing that you can do that can stop you from being my son. By the way, go get his stuff, put it back on him because this is my son. I remember when I'd go off to college, like my mom would not change my room. Like it was always there for me, even though like I went away, she didn't really change like anything. It just was kind of the same. So when I came back home, I still had a place to live. And I think that's really common for a lot of us, right? Where a lot of families will kind of keep particular rooms the same for the person to be able to come back and still have a home. And this is actually what's true in this situation, where the father didn't like change his room. He's like, go back into his room, go grab his stuff, right? Because it was still there. The sandals were still there, the robe was still there, right? Though the son throws everything away and he leaves and demotes himself, the father's like, just because you left doesn't mean I changed your room. Doesn't mean I gave your room to somebody else. Your room is always open. You always have a room in my house. And your stuff is just how you found it. Right? Like, my goodness, like the father's like, I know that you don't think that like you're good enough right now to be my son, but are you kidding me? There's nothing you can do that can't make you my son. You are my son. And then, well, he throws the party. And all of a sudden, here comes the older son who's not having any of it. He's super angry, and he's not going to go into the party. And so the father goes out to him, which is, again, is another beautiful reality of the father coming towards us, right? And he begins to have this conversation, and the son just lets his dad have it, right? And he's like, basically throws the sins of his brother, of his younger brother, in the face of his dad, right? He's like, he did this, and he squandered your money on prostitutes and life of dissipation. Like, how can you do this, right? Like, I've done everything you've asked. I've served you perfectly, and I've never gotten like a goat, right? Or anything that I can feast on with my friends. And here's the response of the dad. He first off says, my son. Because what's interesting is the older son actually demoted himself in this actual conversation, because he says, when your son did this, this, and this, which is actually telling his dad, I'm not your son anymore, right? You treat him more like a son than you treat me. And the father immediately is like, you cannot do that. You are my son, right? So he actually reclaims him. He doesn't let his actual older son live in that truth. No, you are my son. So my son, he says to him, reclaiming him, not letting him live in that false lie and reality. Right? He says, everything I have is yours. Like, you've been with me always. Like, you're always with me. The father is absolutely revealing once again, like, you have access to me. I'm always here. Like, anything you want, just ask. So it's kind of interesting. It kind of seems like the older son never even asked. Right? And this is where I want to begin to kind of speak about the father's response to both of his sons. Because this actually reveals more than anything how God the Father sees us. So when the younger son approaches his dad and he basically just like completely reveals, right, the sins. Like, I've sinned against you. I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you, right? And as well, when the older son throws the sins of his younger brother in the face of his dad. Question: did the father ever acknowledge in his response the sin? Think about it. Did God the Father, right, did the Father in this moment ever acknowledge the sin of his younger son? No. He never even mentioned it once. Never. Why? Why? Because, my brothers and sisters, God the Father primarily always sees us as sons and as daughters, not as sinners. We have this mode sometimes of always just speaking of, I am this, I am a sinner, I'm sorry, you're not your action, and God doesn't see you and know you as son or daughter by your actions. I like to say it this way. You are a son or a daughter who happens to sin, not a sinner who happens to be a son. This is where we can get it so wrong and twisted. We begin to think that, no, I am a sinner first and foremost, and if I begin to act properly, then I can be seen in God the Father's eyes as a son or a daughter, right? But God won't see me like that, right? I have to earn, right, God the Father's love by being perfect, by doing all the right things. But the moment, right, that I begin to fail, I begin to lose, right, what? My sonship, the love of God the Father. God the Father so beautifully is like, oh, he doesn't even talk about it. Why? Because he's not looking at that. That's not what's most important. The fact is, oh my gosh, my son is right in front of me. I'm looking at you. You're my son. Whatever. Forgive that. Let's talk about you. I want to be with you. My brothers and sisters, we are sons and daughters first and foremost, always in the eyes of God. We are not sinners who happen to be sons and daughters, but we are sons and daughters who happen at times to sin. I am not my action. That's not who I am. That's not who you are. And the reason why the evil one wants to begin to distort this proper image of God the Father, and where he focuses more on our sins, right, that we're just sinners who at times, right, can be sons and daughters of God and worthy of his love, is because he transforms who God is from Father into Master, into Punisher, right? Where it begins to have a relationship that's based in fear, right? Where I can't make a mistake. Well, why? Well, because if I make a mistake, I'm going to get punished, right? Which means I have to be perfect. And if I have to be perfect, then I'm not free to make mistakes. I'm not free to be vulnerable and open and honest, right? Because a master doesn't have your back, right? If he's a master, what does that make us? That makes us slaves, right? That makes us orphans, right? We're alone. That means we got to do everything on our own, right? My master don't got my back. He's all about do what I say. And if you don't, you're going to get beat, right? This is totally a relationship that's based in fear, a relationship that's based in earning God's love. This is totally a false image of who God the Father is and who we are. But this is what the evil one does. He wants to make God the Father out to be a master, out to be a punisher. Why? So that we see ourselves as slaves, that I'm just a sinner who, if I'm good enough, is a son, who if I'm good enough, I'm a daughter, but who I am primarily is a sinner. That is the false image of who God is, which then allows us to see ourselves incorrectly, improperly. But that's not who the Father is. It's not who Papa is. He's a father, not a master, right? And if he's a father, that means he's a father of kids, which makes us sons and daughters primarily. This is one of the beautiful realities that the prodigal son reveals to us, that no, like, I'm sorry, my God is a Papa. He's my Father, which makes me his son, which means I'm not alone, which means my dad has my back, which means, you know what? I can't actually stop being, right, a son. It's who I am, right? Always and forever, I'm always going to be a son. You can't change that. It's who I am, which means that my father loves me for just me. It's who I am. I remember I would usually ask my mom, Mom, did you love me when I was in your womb? And she goes, oh my gosh, absolutely. I'm like, but why, Mama? I was kicking you, right? I was making you super crazy nauseous and throw up. I was not acting awesomely for you. Why do you love me? And she would respond, because you're my son. This is the same reality. God, why would you love me? Because you're my son. Because you're my daughter. No action can stop that. My brothers and sisters, this is the truth. That God always and forever, no matter the mistake, no matter the failure, sees us first and foremost as sons, as daughters. And because of that, He loves us. That my action can't change God's love for me. Why? Because I can't change my sonship. And He loves me just because I'm His son. And He loves you just because you're His son and His daughter. And this whole relationship is based in love. Right? This is the freedom that God desires. This is the reason why Jesus came, why the Father sent His Son. Listen, they have a false understanding of who I am. They think I'm a punisher. They think I'm a master. That's not who I am. Please, will you reveal, right? Will you reveal to my people that I'm a good dad, that I love them, that I'm not here to punish them, but I just want to call them back. I want them to know that my heart is for them, right? My son, will you give up of your life? Will you suffer for them? Will you reveal to them in your very person that I'm a good dad, that I love them, and that I just want a relationship with them? This is the dad that we have, my brothers and sisters, and we can begin to tap into this, tap into the fact that God is Papa, that He loves us, that we're not just sinners who happen to be sons and daughters, but that we're sons and daughters always, that have the ability to sin, that have the ability to do wrong things, but even those actions don't change the fact that our Papa's for us and that He loves us. This is the freedom. This allows us to begin to move in the Christian life and begin to trust our Father more. I can trust a dad. I struggle to trust a master. This is why the devil, first and foremost, always caused war on God the Father. Because he knew that if he could distort who God the Father is, he could distort who we are. And if our image is distorted, our ability to experience the freedom will never, ever happen. This is what Jesus did, my brothers and sisters. So I really challenge you, begin to recognize and see yourself not as what you do, but who you are. That you can't change the reality of who you are by your actions. You are a son, you are a daughter that happens to sin. You are not a sinner who happens to be a son. You got a Father, He loves you. You're a son, you're His daughter, and He is always for you. That no matter whatever happens in your life, you got a Papa who's going to run after you, a Papa who's always going to be there. You don't have to do it on your own anymore. You don't have to figure it all out. You can make mistakes. This is the freedom of the sons of God, my brothers and sisters. This is the freedom of the sons of God. And I look forward as you continue of being able to learn how to live and remain in the freedom. This is the lens that we must see as we enter into the Christian life more and more. This is the image. God is Father, not master. He's Papa, and we're sons and daughters, not slaves. My brothers and sisters, I love you. I'm praying for you. Let us begin to see Papa as Papa and us as beloved sons and daughters. God bless you.